All right. Live and in effect on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and X. Today we're talking about bird flu, ICE, getting arrested, meat packings in Omaha. Let's do it.
People in the chat, do you use a mouse?
I still use a mouse. This scroll wheel is broken. So I've bought another cheaper mouse after I tried to tear it apart. So now this mouse is completely damaged and sharp all over it because I've tried to take screwdrivers and open the mouse to try to fix the problem. And I have a mouse coming this afternoon. I was hoping it would be here for this. What do you use, the trackpad?
Yeah, my laptop has a little trackpad. I use that. I haven't used a mouse in so many years.
A
So,
trackpad is so I use a trackpad, but then it's clumsy. It's not as elegant as the mouse.
really, I don't find that at all.
Have you ever seen Star Trek where they go back in time and he tries to use a computer and he goes, computer, and he thinks it's a microphone, computer, and he's talking to the
No.
mouse? Because mouses are so antique. Maybe you're more futuristic than I am. Ben G says he uses a mouse.
Yeah, weird. A lot of people do. That's strange.
So maybe you're the weird one on this one. I thought maybe
All you people who use mouses, do you have a MacBook or do you have a PC? I'm curious.
Ooh,
Is
you think
this
that's
a PC thing?
I don't think it's a PC thing. When I had a Mac, I used a mouse. Is it vegan to use a mouse, I guess, is the other question. No, of course not. I'm just joking, everybody, before you jump down my throat. As most people are aware, my voice is a little hoarse because of the protesting. And it reminds me of this joke, since I'm talking with a veterinarian. What do you call a veterinarian with a sore throat? A horse doctor. It's funny. So I'm a horse layman, but I have this lasting effect, but Crystal has a different set of and lasting effects of the protests. Crystal, you're still dealing with legal problems?
Yeah, same old. We talked about this extensively last week, so check that out if you need the whole details. But I was arrested last Tuesday during the ICE protests. We were kettled, and I was just trying to get home along with a bunch of other people, and the police did not allow us to leave. This was at 4:30. This was well before the curfew. The curfew wasn't even implemented yet, and I was arrested, handcuffed for about 3 hours, put on a bus and taken to the police station. Other than the fact that it's ridiculous that the police are kettling and arresting people.
Yeah.
I think that should be taken seriously because many innocent people are being kettled and arrested who aren't even part of the protests. I was there just taking photos. I wasn't even part of the protests.
Time to go home.
Yeah, but I am a member of the LA Press Club, and the LA Press Club is suing the LAPD.
Ooh,
So there you go.
yes. I saw a video of a person in a wheelchair being kettled and arrested today.
Yeah.
I am offended by that. I feel like I don't know. Am I crazy? Do I feel like people in wheelchairs should get a free card to go? You can go. We're not going to put you on the prison bus. It just seems so. It's like an extra level of sadistic behavior, putting a person in a wheelchair on a prison bus. It's disgusting to me. And
it's disgusting, the bootlicking that I'm seeing. How many people are like, serves you right for being there. These are from the people who wanted to virulently protect our Second Amendment right to bear arms against an oppressive government, who are now saying we don't even have the right to protest. Okay.
yeah, it's funny because I remember this to put the shoe on the other foot. On January 6th, when the protests started there, I was like, they have a right to protest. They're marching on the Capitol. It's fine. And then they broke into the Capitol and stole stuff and did all this stuff. And it was just this senseless act at that point. They hurt police. They did these things. That was when they crossed the line. But it seems like these protesters never got to the point to cross that line. So I think it's disgusting that people are bootlicking the government. Do you remember a while back, because I think this connects to bird flu, there was this disease called SARS, mostly in Asia, but it was a global sensation. People were getting SARS all over the country. Or do you remember that? And people were saying that the accessory of the time, now this is way before anyone in America ever wore masks to work. They said that was like the summer accessory was the mask because everyone in Asia was doing the mask thing. And there were even jokes about how you would have tan lines after this summer because of everyone wearing their masks. Maybe this year's summer accessory is handcuffs. Seems like everyone's getting
Or
arrested.
gas masks if you wanna protect yourself against the tear gas. That might be
Gas
it.
masks.
Everybody's walking around with helmets and gas masks on in
Yeah.
LA. It's pretty funny.
That's
So,
true, but even the senators and congress people and judges and New York comptrollers are wearing handcuffs these days.
yeah,
Everyone's getting
everybody's getting
handcuffs put
arrested.
on them. Yeah.
It's the cool thing to do if you haven't been arrested yet, by yeah,
Go
the
out and get arrested
who's
this
in
summer.
power. It's the thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These summer accessories, exactly. And of course, it's not just people in power who are being arrested or being threatened to be arrested. It's people at the quote unquote lowest rungs of these hierarchical systems. And we've talked a little bit about that in our other shows. We especially talked about police horses and what's happened to them during all these protests. But today I really wanted to ask you, Crystal, if you'll humor me. I really want to talk about Investigate Midwest. I'm pretty sure that you're familiar with that publication, right?
Yeah,
You've been quoted in that publication, huh?
yeah, yeah. The recent publication was about depopulation, the big business of killing birds. I forget what the title was, but they were talking about the way that they kill the animals, the children used in
Right.
depopulations, how they're being forced to shower in water that smells like dead birds, and they're not given the right PPE. It was a really thorough, great article that I highly recommend you check out by John McCracken. You can search Investigate Midwest, my name Crystal Heath, John McCracken, Depopulation, the big business of depopulation or
Or
something like
even
that.
better, you can go to our press page on ourhonor.org,
Yeah,
right? You can see it
it's
there.
right there. Honor.org/press, I believe it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go to ourhonor.org/press and check out that. But really, Investigate Midwest, I have been reading more of their work, and I really like how they bring it back to show how all animals are being affected by these systems,
Mm.
including the human being, including the worker. And they paint this awesome story every time they do it. I really like it. This week, I guess it came out yesterday. It's this awesome story about Omaha, the Glen Valley meat packers. Now, in Glen Valley, we've seen them have a lot of Glen Valley is one of the big ones. Omaha is the biggest meat slaughterhouse. What would you call it? The biggest meat city they claim to be
Mm.
over there. And it was weird because there was public outcry. ICE is raiding slaughterhouses. And because it's easy pickings, isn't it? At least 74 of the plant's nearly 140 workers were arrested. That's over half of their entire slaughterhouse and their entire business. Now, they're saying that possibly that's indicative of the entire industry, that about 50% of the people working in slaughterhouses are undocumented or don't have the legal right to be, don't have the legal status to be here. And so people are seeing their uncles disappear. They're seeing there's a lot of people in these towns now in middle of Nebraska where there's people that are missing a father, they're missing a spouse, they're missing a kid, they're missing an uncle, whatever. And there's all these support groups sprouting up to help those people, not just legally, but emotionally. It's taking its toll on these towns.
At least 74 of the plant's nearly 140 workers had been arrested and taken to a
Yeah.
detention facility. The production at the chicken and steak plant dropped 80%, according to company officials.
I wonder, will it well, the stockyards, how are they going to continue? How there's got to be a backup. There's going to have to be ripple effects, right? I think it will lead to depopulation. I think that's what
Yeah.
we're looking at.
I really like this graph that they show of how much we're increasingly relying on undocumented
Yes.
workers. Now 42.1% undocumented in 2002 compared with only, oh, well, I'm confused. It was
No,
I guess
I
it was
think you're right.
higher back at 2,053.9, but it looks like it's lower. I don't
Well, the US
hmm,
born is it goes up and down,
yeah.
but as you can see, the undocumented is still a tremendous amount, right?
Yeah, it's still a lot.
And then the other ones are residents or green card holders. They're not safe, and others are naturalized. Now that happens because you'll see multiple generations working in these businesses and in these towns, and so those people are getting naturalized because they'll have sponsors. They'll have kids, and their kids will sponsor them, and they'll become naturalized citizens. So a lot of this right here, this orange, it's getting gobbled up by the naturalization process.
Interesting.
Yeah, and this is only in 2022. It's gonna be wild. So the other thing that I thought was really interesting here is that there is no, I think it's the H-2A visa that you use in order to bring in temporary workers. So farms can hire guest workers through the H-2A program, which has grown in population, which makes sense, right? It's better to get permission, but they're cracking down on that too. Debate in the Senate and the House and Congress to expand the H-2A visas to include slaughterhouses and to make it easier to get them, see migrant workers.
Mm.
But not so long ago, we were looking at reports about how a lot of workers are not taking advantage of this H-2A system because they're afraid of coming here now, or they're being held at the border and they can't get over, locked up.
Like that one guy from Venezuela who was trying to seek asylum in the US and missed his court date, and his lawyer's like, "Where is this guy?" 60 Minutes went down to CCOT and was
Yes.
filming and took a picture of this man who was screaming, and then they found his lawyer and was like, "Yeah, that's him." Oh my god, it is devastating. Like these just
Imagine.
these
Yeah, his family doesn't know where he is. His lawyers don't know where he is. It's
yeah.
shocking. That's what I'm talking about. These whole towns. Like I did a tour in Nebraska last year. Spent a lot of time in Nebraska, and there are towns that everything's in Spanish, right? I think it's called Fremont, Nebraska, Omaha. I was in Lincoln. They there's areas that very Hispanic. It's because of not just slaughterhouses, but farms and stockyards and all of this animal husbandry or animal work is occupied by Spanish speakers. Now, what do those communities look like? Think about that. If you're talking about just disappearing people, think about just the, I tell you what, I was in Las Vegas when the shooting happened, and it was like everyone knew someone who had been shot or who was at the place in Mandalay Bay. It was like it takes over the whole town when something big like that happens. I can't imagine the morale of these towns in Nebraska.
This is Warren Buffett's town, so I was just kinda looking to see if Warren Buffett has very many ag investments, and surprisingly, not really,
No.
so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, he likes the blue chips, yeah, the
Yeah.
long haul, the ones that he can help. Yeah, so what I think too, the question that I also had for you maybe, and maybe for the chat was, do we, so it's a, there's a growing bipartisan support to extend the H-2A program to meat packing facilities. Would pressuring our representatives to not extend the H-2A visa program to meat packing, would that,
I don't think it's worth our time to dip our toe in to
no?
that conversation. I just think this is I don't know. Yeah.
I think this labor issue is going to be bigger and bigger. If we can't find the labor, if these industries can't find the labor, who are they going to put in these positions? I think they're going to put,
It's increasingly going to be automated. Like at this point, to slaughter chickens, they load them all into a controlled atmospheric stunning thing by the
yeah.
truckload. They're all killed, and they'll have robots pull them out and slaughter
Mm.
them, and it all the inspection done by AI inspecting the carcasses and stuff. I don't know. It'll be increasingly automated.
I've seen these robot slaughterhouses and they look horrific, but also impressive in a way. All the ways they are doing these things with the robots. Most of the stuff I see at meat packing places, it's dudes standing elbow to elbow with knives still.
I think that'll change soon, and it'll be
Mm,
increasingly automated.
maybe you're right. Yeah, it'll be increasingly automated, but in the meantime, we're still using convicts and ex-cons and people who have questionable legal status. I feel like we're probably going to see more cons and ex-cons in there, convicts, people who are
Yeah.
incarcerated being forced to work in these
I mean, there's also
conditions.
talk of the people who are detained by ICE are now getting paid $1 a day to work in these ag facilities. Sentient
That's
Media
right.
just did an article about that. So here's a new way to implement slavery is by just detaining people and forcing people to work for $1 a day so that they have $5 at the end of the week to make a phone call to their
Yeah,
families.
or buy of a phone call. Geez, they'll buy ramen. Ramen, I think, costs $5 in some of these places. I know that's a
Mhm.
hot commodity in these prisons, but it's something I've been talking about for months now. As I think that if you have somebody's legal status as prisoner, and the Constitution allows for prisoners to be enslaved, then that's a workforce that'll be used increasingly in these situations. And I don't see how else now that Donald Trump I shouldn't just say Donald Trump, his administration has lifted the speed limits of slaughterhouses. The speed limit goes, there is no speed limit anymore. So they're pushing to go more quickly, but there's fewer people to handle the load, and robots aren't here yet. I think it looks like more injuries and more
Yep,
slaves,
as it does.
as it
Yes.
does. Yeah. So I wonder what our position is then when it comes to these labor things. Like, obviously, we're against slavery. And I wonder what position we have when it comes to these new visas that they're doing.
Are these people who are getting visas to work here being informed of their rights too? Do they know that they have protections while here? Are we doing enough outreach to them and making sure that they're okay? I hope that we would do that.
Man, I hope so too. Although, again, the comptroller of New York City was just thrown on the ground and violently handcuffed because he had the nerve to try to inform someone of their rights. I did want to just put up, oh, these are the resume. I wanted to just show the video
Mm,
of the arrest at Glen Valley just very quickly, if that's
okay.
okay. This is actually at the slaughterhouse now. These are people in in Omaha. Look at this.
Yeah.
He wants to hurt them.
Like he would run them over or smash
Yeah,
them into something.
look at them all masked up.
This girl in the front of the car, I'm just like, she's so brave.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a woman doing that.
The man got on top, both of them. She's the one left, right? Oh my God. Watch, they're gonna take her too. There's another kid getting hit. Get back as he's chasing the kid. Get back.
Mm.
Jesus. Let me see your face. So there's so much to unpack right now. As everyone now should know, a person was impersonating a police officer and killed two legislators in Minnesota, shot four people, had a list of more people he was planning on murdering, and now we have these cops have masks on. How do we even know they're cops? They won't identify themselves.
Yeah.
They're in a black SUV, and they got masks on, no
Yeah.
badges. I can't believe there hasn't been gunplay over this, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, my doorbell rang today. I thought, "Oh my god, they're here." That was my first thought today. Because I see them in the streets around my neighborhood. I see these black cars that look exactly like that. They have those little rhino guards on,
Hmm.
spotlights, blacked out windows, and then you, like, try to see who's driving, they got masks on.
Yeah.
What are we doing here, man? And everybody who tries to tell me that all these slaughterhouse workers are the devil and all this, man, these people are exploited and we're just exploiting them more. Yes, the
That's
corporations, exactly.
And I'm
Ugh.
surprised the corporations aren't doing more to just allow, although maybe this is their method of getting cheaper labor is by detaining people and imprisoning people and using prison and detained worker labor.
I'm thinking that's it. They can get more people of a dollar. The same workers, likely the same human, will now be working for $1 a day because now they're a prisoner and not a person with rights.
Some animal rights groups are celebrating because Trump was like, "Oh, we're not going to raid farms and hotels." And they were just like drawing attention to the fact that Trump was
Yeah.
decided not to raid farms and stuff. But of course, to protect the interests of corporations, but he did reverse course on that almost
Yes.
immediately. So I wonder corporations are benefiting from this somehow. And I do think they're going to figure out how to do this. Manning Beef, which is the slaughterhouse near here, they just posted an ad looking for more workers. Yesterday, there was some protests in Pico Rivera
Mhm.
because ICE was in town and at the Walmart. And I don't know if they were also at Manning Beef. Um,
Watched the Walmart arrest this morning on my morning show, and they jumped out with AR-17s or whatever they have, AR-15s, and there was just a kid saying, "Don't pick on this old man," and they brutalized him as well. A kid in a Walmart vest. So he worked there, and they were beating up on this older guy, and the kid's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" They didn't identify themselves. They're not cops as far as if you don't say you're a cop, you're not a cop. Crap out of this kid and put a gun in his face.
And it's weird, if you're a citizen, you don't have to carry around papers, but if you do have a visa or something, you have to carry documentation on you. But, like, how do you if you just say, "I'm a citizen, I don't have to carry documentation," like, how do they I don't know, how do they assess who's who?
Well, do you see what
It's
happened up the ball? Yeah, that's supposed to be due process, right? We assess who's who by bringing them into a courtroom. That's how we do that, but that's not how we're doing it anymore. No one has any rights. There was a
yeah.
kid down the street who they threw up against a fence in Orange County because they said, and he's screaming, "I'm a citizen, I'm a citizen, I'm a citizen." And they asked him, "What hospital were you born in?"
Mm,
What? Is that what cops are doing now?
yeah,
I think
and
this is when I was a kid, I learned about McCarthyism and how Disney and Ronald Reagan turned in people who were quote unquote communists to the House on I forget House on American. I feel like this is our McCarthyism. This is that George R. Murrow, he said, Accusation is not proof." This is exactly this is what America's based on. Accusation does not equal proof.
ICE arrested more than 100,000 people suspected of violating immigration law from January 20th to the first week of June, according to the White House. This figure amounts to an average of 750 arrests per day, double the average over the past decade. Still, the pace of arrests remains far short of what Trump would need to deport millions of people. In late May, Miller set a quota for 3,000 arrests per day and told ICE leadership that they should target anyone without legal status. Interesting. So, yeah,
The
that's
Steve Miller quota was what kicked off all that stuff in LA, what ended up getting you arrested. That's that 3,000 number. All of these numbers have been ridiculous from day one. You cannot deport 15 million people from anywhere without concentration camps. It's literally impossible. It's undoable. So they know, and they know this. And that's why GEO stock skyrocketed when all this started. And
GEO stock? What's GEO?
yeah, they build prisons. They're a private prison
Oh, okay.
company. They run a sizable number of prisons and are but all those ones that are like them, Geo's like their Calmain, the big one. And they're increasing capacities, and they are greasing the wheels with politicians. So it's a great scam if you think about it. The GEO, through lobby efforts, give money to politicians. The politicians change policy in order to arrest more people, and then you and I, the taxpayer, pay GEO to incarcerate them. It's a really clever way to make a dollar.
Yeah. And then the corporations make money off of prison labor and everything. But there's this new Senate bill that will limit federal bird flu assistance for egg companies. This new bill, Senator Jack Reed, Democrat from Rhode Island, introduced S 1904, known as Ending Taxpayer Support for Big Egg Producers Act, that would require egg producers to obtain certain certifications in order to receive federal indemnification and or compensation for poultry flocks affected by HPAI. The bill defines a covered entity as having more than $100 million in annual revenue and more than 1,500 employees. The
Wow.
legislation was referred to the Senate Agriculture Committee for its consideration. Reed singled out large egg companies in his introductory statement for the bill, believing that they use the HPAA crisis as an excuse to inflate egg prices to unfairly high levels to pad their profits. In
Well,
March, he
fairly
asked,
obvious, isn't
yeah,
it? The egg prices thing was entirely manufactured. I liken it to the fact that there's a war in a country in the Middle East that isn't even an oil producer, and all of a sudden gas prices go up because they know the getting's good.
yeah, it's interesting. I do think clearly like there were empty store shelves, but the thing is, these large companies, they lose a facility because of bird flu. They get taxpayer indemnity payments, but then they also profit from the increased price of eggs because of
Right.
this. So it's a little bit unfair. Meanwhile, there's a small egg producer where if they're hit, that's their entire revenue and they're just out of luck. So I can see even if you're an egg producer, this sort of makes sense.
But
Yeah.
like you said, they get it. They take advantage. They get something because increased egg prices, but the prices of the eggs didn't just go up. They raised them. They didn't have to raise them the way they did. They didn't need to triple the price. They just knew that they could triple the price.
I think there is a little bit of supply and demand there because there were empty grocery store shelves. Was there manufactured increase? I don't know. Some people were having a hard time getting eggs. We did lose what, the 10% of our flock or something like that. I forget what the exact numbers were. Clearly, we produce such a surplus of eggs that even though we haven't been able to replenish those birds, we're still like the egg supply is there now and eggs
Yeah,
have gone
shelves
down.
anymore. I feel like they took it. It feels again, it's a COVID thing. Toilet paper, it's gone. There's empty shelves. Did we actually have a toilet paper shortage? No. A bunch of jerks went out and bought all the toilet paper. I think the same kind of thing. People heard about it. There was a
Mm.
panic. There was a rush. You saw it, and then so they knew that they took advantage of that. They tripled their prices, quadrupled their prices, and because of the panic, people continued to buy them at those prices. But there was no balance. There were still empty shelves despite the high prices.
Yeah. It's interesting. There was that report of there was a 30% decrease in demand for eggs because of high egg
Yes.
prices. I wonder what that was about.
Okay, we're not gonna get to the bottom of it perfectly, but I think what's obvious at least is that we do know that they reported record profits. We do know that the prices went up, and we know that demand was going down. I feel like we could say pretty safely that these companies at least manufactured a portion of what was going on so that they can reap record profits.
Yeah. So who will be affected by this? Oh, Cal-Maine Foods, of course. They
Mm.
won't get indemnity payments. Roseacre Farms is another one that has more than $100 million in revenue and maybe more than 1,500 workers. It's hard because a lot of these companies aren't public. Another one is Hillendale Farms and Versova Holdings, Daybreak Foods, Michael Foods, Purdue. I'm not sure about, but
But are they getting indemnity payments because of HPAI, or is this just for egg producers, or is it
only egg producers. Yeah.
okay. How are we supposed to feel about this whole thing?
How do you feel about it?
I feel like we should be publicly, as a government and as a people, publicly moving away from this, obviously, but also try to I don't like that we're just like I feel like we're bailing out the Titanic all the time. Like we've got our little cups and we're trying to scoop all the water out of the bowels of the Titanic as she goes down. We're bilge pumping the Titanic. It just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I wonder if we can advocate for them to change the standards, maybe to affect more egg producers than just those couple of egg producers. I wonder why they drew the line there at $100 million a year and what was it, 1,500 workers. I wonder if we can lower that and get more companies affected by that.
I have a feeling the reason why they drew that line there was because they had a negotiation saying that we gotta do something, and the companies wrote that. That's why. They're the ones who
Probably.
wrote it, the big
Yeah.
ones.
So our honor can stop making a fuss about the fact that these companies are being bailed out. These billion-dollar companies are being bailed out.
There still are a lot of non-MAGA, more actual conservative people who are on our side with this. They don't like seeing public funds going to bail out these corporations all the time. There's people on both sides of the aisle who are pressuring these companies. We just need them to do it in a more meaningful way.
So also this week, Hickman's Egg Farm is a big egg facility
Right.
that's lost about 6 million birds, and about 95% of their birds have been lost. So they announced that they were closing down for 2 years. John Corsland, who is a hog vet of 25 years, engaged in a farrow to finish swine and crop production in north central Iowa on his family farm and then joined USDA APHIS.
Ah.
He has this great blog that I always reference, comments how last Friday, the USDA's National Animal Lab released genetic data from 10 recent bird flu outbreaks in poultry. Most were caused by the B313 strain, but 2 were the D11 strain, which is the strain that's been linked to human infections.
Yeah, D11. I know about D12, but when M&M left, they just weren't the same. D11, and they're poisonous. You don't want D11. You want D12.
Okay. I don't know what you're talking about, but
That's all
these
right.
D11 samples are rumored to match the virus found in dairy cows in Arizona. So this suggests that the bird flu may have spread from cows to poultry, something officials haven't confirmed publicly, which seems highly likely that these poultry facilities are sucking in infected dust and debris from nearby infected dairy facilities. So,
Oh, 100%. I think that there's no doubt that these giant fans sucking air and blowing them over all of these chickens aren't sucking in the virus. Whether no matter what the vector may be, they're sucking in the virus and blowing it up over all the chickens. It makes no sense that they keep on getting it again. Do you
yeah.
think that these farmers are so dumb that they're all just sitting there scratching their heads? Oh, ding dang do. I just don't know why we keep on getting infected.
I think it's motivated ignorance. Like they don't want to know. They just want to assume it's wild birds that are causing this problem. They don't want to admit that it's their own practices. It's the dairies. It's the confinement of mass numbers of animals that are perpetuating this outbreak.
And they
And so
blame their workers a lot too. Like when we were
yeah.
listening to the Eggheads podcast, they were talking about biosecurity measure. Everyone but Brooke Rollins and everybody else talked biosecurity, but it's always coming back down to putting the onus on the worker. The worker sat down to tie his shoe. There was even a person saying there was a barrier there and the worker sat down on it to tie his shoes, and oh, that's all over now. It's not the
Yeah. The USDA and Arizona Department of Agriculture have refused to release any details about testing at nearby dairies or what next steps are being taken to protect workers. And the Arizona Department of Health hasn't said anything about monitoring people for symptoms like eye infections or respiratory illness, even though the strain has jumped to humans before. So FOIA Friday, like we got to FOIA the Arizona Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, all of these. This outbreak has been going on for almost a month. One infected dairy herd was confirmed back May 7th, but we've heard nothing. So are these farm workers being checked or just left in the dark, or are they being picked up by ICE agents?
So, yes, I think the ICE thing poses a whole other dimension to this, right? They're picking up workers, and so you either have to hire people who have 0 experience and have to train them all over in even the meager biosecurity measures that they take. You have to train them all over again. When the E. coli outbreak happened at Chipotle, The big thing they were saying, the reason why they're having so many problems was because of turnover. That turnover was causing it because as soon as they train someone how to properly wash the vegetables, properly wash their hands, training, by the time they got done, they were out. They were already quitting. Right now, some of these places are losing 50% of their workforce. How are they going to train all these people to properly biosecure their
Yeah, and Corsland
no,
says that many states claim that the national milk testing strategy is being implemented, but details are extremely limited. Poultry outbreaks show H5N1B313 remains out there in mid-continental US. We really don't know where and how much because we just aren't testing. H5N1 in dairy is not a confidential state vet dairy industry problem to be managed privately. Infected poultry, cats, hospitalized humans will eventually catch up with that strategy.
it's Cargill's an oligarchy and Cal-Maine is a corporation. Though that's who we have to vote between, but we could still, no matter what your political persuasion is, if you care about animals and care about rethinking the system that we're putting them through, then no matter what your political persuasion is, you have to speak up. And
The track record seems to show that dairy spillover infections may be resistant to control through traditional HPAI biosecurity protocols. And he says, sorry, Secretary Rollins. I know that will be a controversial statement. My reasoning is that natural crossover between operations, especially high biosecurity layer farms, is less likely, and B313 virus has not been shown to be carried by wildlife. Yet H5N1 seems to be easily gain entry to large poultry populations from larger dairy populations. But of course, like there is a way, like maybe they'll invent ventilation systems that can filter out viruses. Like
oh
maybe
yeah,
that'll
remember they were saying they were going to do that on airplanes. They're going to have special filters so that you can't get viruses on airplanes. Wow, is that's think they'll do that for chickens too?
probably. I know Opal Foods was installing those fancy black ventilation systems into all of their barns. I wonder if those are things that filter out viruses. Like we will see.
Mm,
They were investing $10 million into their facility or something to upgrade it. So we will
10,
see.
10 million. But what do you think is the impact of these ice raids on H5N1 at the end of the day?
The workers are going to be even more reluctant to test and participate
Right.
with any disease surveillance. So we'll know even less about how many workers are infected. It's really strange how there are these massive depopulations in Arizona. And usually, when there's large depopulations like this, we hear about, oh, a new couple workers were infected with H5N1.
Yeah,
Didn't
not this
hear
time.
anything about that this time. Wonder why.
Yeah.
Actually, really missed opportunity to go to Arizona and watch how that depopulation was going down. Regret not being there right now. And if anybody is in Arizona, drive by and tell us and take pictures
Take
and
pictures.
tell us what's going on. You don't have to break the law to
That's
find
Hickman in
out.
Arizona.
Hickman in Arizona. And if you need an address, I can give you an address. Like it's not hard to find.
It's funny, if they're going to arrest you for showing up for court, they call them up and say, "Okay, come to court. We got to talk." And when they show up, they get arrested. I think no one, if they said, "Okay, everyone, show up. All we're gonna do is test you for a virus," they'll be like, "I feel fine. I'm not going. I'm not gonna get arrested." I
Yeah.
wouldn't do it at this point. Forget that. No way. The workers come in, they have no clue they can contract zoonotic disease or pathogens, human rights atrocities. They don't explain this. They don't tell them the value of PPE. You're absolutely right. They're not properly training them. It's bad. I wanted to ask you too, because I'm this thing that keeps hitting my radar is this stuff with screw worms. Do you know about
Yeah, I
screw
haven't been
worms?
following that very much, but the industry seems very worried about this.
Secretary
Mhm.
Rawlins has posted a thing on the USDA, a bold plan to combat New World screwworms northward spread. She says, "We've eliminated the pest before and we'll eliminate them again. We have defeated this pest in the past, and there's no chance of us not doing it again." They're saying there's a five-pronged effect, ability to detect, control, and eliminate this pest. I don't understand why it's coming again. Is it because of global warming that it's coming? They don't tell me in the USDA why it's coming up, but they found all sorts of new ways to here's the five-pronged approach is the USDA is they're going to stop the pest from spreading in Mexico and ensure we are full partners in eradication. I think that's pretty funny. Like now we want to be partners with Mexico. We've talked so much trash on them and not wanted to dumping tariffs on them and all this stuff. And now we're like, "Oh, you guys want to work together on this screwworm problem?" If
Yeah,
I
there's just endless problems with animal-based protein production. And imagine if we invested all of the resources we're investing to deal with these issues into animal-free forms of food production, we would be further along in protecting our nation's food security. But no, we're
Yeah.
just going to continue propping up this antiquated method of protein production and keep dealing with these problems.
They're gonna introduce sterile flies, $21 million expenditure, and then we have the USDA is actually doing in-person audits in Mexico. We're sending USDA officers down there. These in-person visits have allowed a unique opportunity for APHIS to see firsthand the challenges and opportunities in Mexico. So we're down in Mexico now in order to try to keep animal agriculture and business up here. We are now operating abroad. It seems ridiculous. Of course, the border, protect the border at all costs is number 2. Maximize the readiness. They're finalizing an emergency management plan, and they're going to ensure they have sufficient North American NWS no New World Screwworm. That's what NWS New World Screwworm. They have new traps and technical expertise that they're finding in Mexico, trying to pave down the federal regulatory hurdles and take the fight to the screwworm. Really want to talk with our friend Andre about this because we're taking screwworms and making sterile screwworms so that they mate with the other screwworms so that to control the population. Does seem like a good idea to anybody?
We do that quite frequently, but yeah, I agree. We're solving the problem in front of us instead of trying to ask if it's even a problem that needs to exist in the first place. We're just always doing that problem. Yeah.
Or bilge pumping the Titanic? Totally. All right, we had a great conversation with Andrew this morning, and I thought that we'd play that. Oh,
Yeah, we could, if you wanted, look at anything you've got for an op-ed and workshop that. But I know we're both tired, and if you want to just cut it short and play Andrew's thing, that's totally fine too.
I do want to play Andrew's
Okay.
thing,
All
and
right.
but just so everybody knows, I will still be in the chat talking while we're playing this, and I hope that everyone sticks around and looks at Andre. He's this incredible vet. Crystal introduces him again on the thing I'm about to show. Yeah, so thanks everyone for showing up to All Beings Considered, and we'll see you next Wednesday in All Beings Considered too, and I'll see you in the chat.
All
All
right.
right.
Bye.
Well, Dr. Crystal Heath, we're going to talk to someone on the other side of the world, on the other side of the pond at least. Do you want to introduce him?
Yeah, Dr. Andrew Knight, a hero of mine, has long fought for animal welfare. He is a veterinary professor of animal welfare, and after teaching at Ross University School of Veterinary Medicine from 2013 to 2014, he established the Center for Animal Welfare and has 2 animal welfare degrees at the University of Winchester. In 2015, he left to establish his own nonprofit organization and now does animal welfare research and outreach full time. He's also an adjunct professor at Murdoch University Veterinary School, Western Australia, one of Australia's leading veterinary schools, and in the School of Environment and Science at Griffith University, Queensland. He is a British, European, American, and New Zealand veterinary specialist in animal welfare and a fellow of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons and a principal fellow of Advance HE. His book includes the costs and benefits of animal experiments and the Routledge Handbook of Animal Welfare, published in 2023. So he's done a ton, he's written a ton, and I want to find out how he does it all.
Let's bring him on, Dr. Andrew Knight. Let's do it. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, and Jack.
Welcome to All Beings Considered, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Good day, I guess I should say.
I'm wondering, how did it all begin? What was your relationship with animals early on in your childhood?
Crikey, going back to my childhood, I was raised in Perth, Western Australia, a land, by the way, of eternal sunshine and some of the best beaches in the world. My parents gave me a book on baby animals when I was about 8 years old, and it had pictures of baby deer and other animals. And I declared that I was no longer going to eat these animals. They were far too cute.
Wow.
And I
At
was
8
going,
years old?
yeah, I was going
Wow.
vegetarian. So my family was sympathetic and thought this will only last about a week, and no worries, we'll humour little Andrew. And it lasted years and decades, in fact. So here I am today.
So did you have any like animals growing up?
We had a lovely black cat called Susie, and I didn't know how to speak dog. Growing up with a cat, I learned how to speak cat really well. Knew exactly where to scratch them and their body language. I can even purr quite effectively. But I couldn't speak dog until I got into veterinary clinical practice and just became exposed to so many of them. And fairly quickly, I learned to speak dog as well.
So what made you decide to go to veterinary school?
Yeah, I was actually, as a young person, trying to work out what to do with my life. I wanted to try to do some good in the world as much as I could. And so I explored a number of things initially. I was involved in Australia's campaigns to increase our foreign aid budget, campaigns to ban landmines for human rights. And I pretty quickly realized that millions and billions more animals are being severely impacted by people than humans abusing one another,
Yeah.
even though the difference in capacity to suffer wasn't billions of times less. So I thought, actually, if I'm going to have the maximum positive impact, I need to be really focusing on animal issues, although I still support human rights and environmental concerns and so on. So I pretty quickly switched. In Perth, Western Australia, where I was, it was also the world capital of the live sheep export trade. We
Wow.
export sheep on longer sea voyages than almost any other country, about 2.5 weeks to Middle Eastern countries. And it was also the largest. We were exporting about 5 million sheep a year. And because of poor conditions on the ships, in particular, up to 150,000 would die on ships each year before they arrived, and a similar number in feedlots after they arrived. This was one of the biggest animal welfare problems, certainly in my part of the world. I helped launch the Australian campaign against the live sheep export trade in the mid to late 1990s, giving away my age here. I found it really satisfying to be working on issues that were making a real difference to millions of sentient creatures. And I thought, how do I set myself up to do this as a career? At the time, I was doing lots of radio interviews about live sheep trade, and I would give facts and figures, and it would always go really well up until a certain point, which was then when they would ask me, what do you do for a living? And I'd have to say, I deliver newspapers or I deliver pizzas. And I quickly realized that people were assessing the merits of the information I was giving them on the basis of what I did for a living. So I thought, how do I solve this? I need to find a proper profession that will give me credibility with all sorts of stakeholders when I'm trying to advocate for animals, advanced knowledge about animals and animal welfare issues. And I thought the ideal thing is to attempt to become a veterinarian. So I just went back to school and studied my butt off for nearly a year, did some experience with vets, and managed to get into vet school. And I thought things would be smooth sailing then, but I rapidly ran into an even bigger issue, which was the use of harmful use of animals in the veterinary curriculum.
But the thing is, veterinary school and the veterinary profession isn't always friendly to those ideas and advocacy. Did you know going in that the veterinary profession had this culture, or was it like a surprise to you?
Absolutely. The veterinary profession really has its origins in supporting farmers to maximise the productivity and profitability of their farms when they're farming animals, or within horse owning communities. Either wealthy people or the military would also use horses a lot in times past. Historically, there wasn't the money to actually spend a lot of money on companion animals, and most people didn't have them. So most vets worked in those two areas. And the ethos of supporting farmers to maximise the profitability of their farming systems, things like the equine racing industry, remain very strong within veterinary schools today. There's also another factor, which is a lot of the research funding for veterinary schools actually is associated with invasive animal research. So there's quite this dominant culture that animals should be used and
Yeah.
be treated very invasively, despite the very serious animal welfare and ethical concerns associated with many of these practices. And when I went into veterinary school, I had the vague idea that this might be the culture, but I reasoned to myself that if I could just survive it, I'd be able to
Mhm.
do so much more good for animals on graduation that it would be worth toughing it out for the 5 year course. It was 5 years in Western Australia.
Short-term pain for some long-term gain.
And it was actually a short term that seemed to last forever. When you're actually in it, it seems
Yeah.
to last forever. But the great thing is it does actually end one day and then thankfully starts to recede into memory, and the rest of your life stretches out in front and you get the benefits.
Those cultural things seem to be the hardest to come up against. And the live transport thing you mentioned, has anything changed over the years? Like, I read about how live transport campaigns or against them are ongoing in places like New Zealand and Australia. But we keep on hearing about ships like the ones you describe, where they open up the doors and there's a bunch of dead animals on board. Has anything changed since you've been involved in those campaigns?
Yeah, I'm really pleased to be able to report that after 30 years, the Australian government recently announced that it was going to actually ban the live sheep export trade. It hasn't done it yet, but they have at least committed to doing so. So this is brilliant. The animal advocacy movement needs to continue to monitor this because there's a long record of governments and industries backsliding on such commitments. But nevertheless, there is a commitment at the moment, which is fantastic news. When you're involved in these campaigns on a day-to-day basis, it often seems that the opposition is huge and you make no progress. But when you take a longer term view, actually, there is a lot of progress that is occurring, which is more heartening.
So you want to take that same lesson to the veterinary field. That you changed the culture or helped change the culture of an entire government and their support of live transport. Maybe something can happen in veterinary medicine.
Yeah, and back to your experience in veterinary school, was there anything that you had to object to in your training to align with your values? Did you push back against the curriculum in any way while you were in school?
Yes, indeed. When I entered, I had the sort of vague idea that harmful animal use might be required in the veterinary curriculum, but I was ignorant of really what the details of that might be. And I, again, rationalized to myself that if I had to be involved in bad things, it would be worth it because I'd be able to do so much more good after graduation. So I didn't really know very much about what I was getting into. I found that there was mass killing of animals to source body parts in the first year introductory biology and second year anatomy courses. So there would be things like rats, snails, earthworms, body parts from all sorts of animals. And for reasons that were never made clear, there was this odd obsession with lampreys. And then we got into invasive experiments on living animals in second year physiology, and that was very invasive experiments on sheep, along with toads and some other animals, but particularly sheep.
Mm.
Students would do things like cut in and cut various nerves, such as those leading to the heart, force their sheep to breathe various different gases, or cut off the air supply entirely, and at the end kill any sheep that were still alive via an anaesthetic overdose, in order to demonstrate principles that have been well established for decades. And then in the surgical part of the course, animals were essentially used as disposable teaching models to practice surgery on. And if they were still alive at the end of the surgeries, they would also be killed by anaesthetic overdose. So most students entered the course, I think, because they really cared about animals and wanted to do good for them and not to harm them. But the culture was so strong that if you don't do these procedures, you won't become a good surgeon, you might fail. Very few students have really the courage to stand up against that, or the willingness to risk very large student debts that they're accumulating going through veterinary school by possibly being failed out of the course if they don't agree to do some of these laboratories. The
Yeah.
ones that do tend to cause trouble are often the mature age students, the ones that are slightly older. I was one of those. Often these students who don't unthinkingly just ingest and agree with everything they're told, have got a little bit of life experience and learn to think a little bit more critically and form their own positions. So, as one of my instructors said, one of the objectives of university is to teach you to think. So we can't really come back to you and say, yes, but we didn't want you to think like that.
Challenge the status quo, be on the cutting
Exactly.
edge of the discipline, but not like that, please.
So I, when I was a student myself, objected to all of this. We had different responses in biochemistry. The academic was supportive and allowed us to use alternatives. In physiology, the academic was a hardcore vivisector. She did a lot of very invasive animal research and declined all our requests for alternatives. So I had to initiate legal action against the university ultimately and involve the mass media. This was actually successful. We got primetime television coverage of mass curricular killing in the veterinary school. There were film crews wandering around campus. It was a public relations disaster. This very rapidly results in progress, whereas all previous rational steps have failed. I've seen this not only in my veterinary school, but with colleagues at other veterinary schools as well, including in the US. And in this case, very rapidly, the university completely stopped all of those laboratories in the middle of semester with no alternatives lined up. So it caused some chaos in the course, and that was due to this professor's intransigence. The university also had the dean of the veterinary school found himself having to explain his position to the state government commissioner for equal opportunity, which administers legislation that outlaws discrimination against students in their education on the basis of their conscientiously held beliefs. And I said I had a conscientiously held belief against unnecessarily harming animals in my education. We're not allowed to discriminate against those sorts of things, as with gender, political beliefs, and various other protected beliefs. So these sorts of beliefs are enshrined within human rights legislation in many jurisdictions around the world. So because of that, the university set up a commission to examine the whole thing and came out and decided that they would actually agree to make reasonable efforts to provide humane alternatives to students that requested them. This was then copied by several other universities across Australia and some internationally as well. So that was great. And then everything went quiet until fourth year. And in fourth year, I hit the surgical program. And this time, the academics were also completely opposed to humane teaching methods. They didn't say no, like the physiology academic had said no. Instead, they said, you've forced us to allow this because the university has ruled on this, but we don't agree with anything you're doing. So, you know what? You can go and get your own surgical instruction outside the university, go and organise it, getting experience assisting with beneficial surgeries on real patients in private veterinary clinics and animal shelters. Find some animals, bring them back to the university and sterilise them, dogs and cats, so they can't reproduce and produce more puppies and kittens. Do it to our high standards, and if you can't achieve that, we'll fail you. So although we're being paid to teach you, we won't teach you, but we will fail you if you can't do it. We said, fantastic, what a giant step forward, because previously these people would never have allowed anything. It would have been a flat no. We said, thank you so much for this for this opportunity. One of us set ourselves to the task of organising our own surgical instruction. We went externally, found private veterinary clinics and animal shelters, ended up getting 5 times the amount of surgical experience that our classmates got.
Yeah.
Finding homeless dogs and cats, brought them back to the university, did surgery, did absolutely fine, and ended up having much more confidence and competence with surgery when we graduated than our classmates that had gone through the conventional program.
How many were you? You had this crew of other vet
Two,
students that two,
two,
an army of two. Okay, great.
yeah.
Sometimes
That's
it
all
just
you need.
takes one other person to be on your side.
That's
Yeah.
And
true.
Because we got so much extra experience, the vet school actually decided to make the animal shelter sterilisation program mainstreamed into the curriculum, so all students could benefit from this later on. So there you go.
yeah.
Yeah, that was vet school. It wasn't quite. I almost failed in the process, but we made it because I spent more time organising alternatives than actually studying.
But despite all the time you had to spend organizing these alternatives, you also got so much more. I didn't participate in any unethical labs that involved animal killing, and I volunteered at the animal shelter. And I now the most majority of my job is surgery, and I love it. And we just got accepted our paper into the Journal of Veterinary Medical Education, where we got public records of all of the US veterinary schools and how many animals they kill in each school. And so that will be published hopefully shortly. And I can't wait until that's done. So we've spent 3 years working on this paper and getting all the data and everything. But it's still very common in US veterinary schools, unfortunately.
It's
But
fantastic news. There's been no good information on that for many years, so I'm really pleased to hear that that's coming. And as you say, there's still so much harmful animal use. The rate of progress is glacial. There is
yeah,
progress, but it's so slow.
it's crazy. Speaking to veterinarians who fought this 30 years ago in their vet schools, and the fact that vet schools still are doing these unethical labs is really frustrating. But I predict in 5 years, it's going to be done. We're no longer going to be killing animals in veterinary school training. That's my goal, my timeline for change, but we'll see what happens. Once you graduated veterinary school, what did you do after that? Did you ever work as a general practice veterinarian or anything
Yeah.
like that?
So I went to the United Kingdom and practiced veterinary medicine mostly around London for nearly a decade, just in small animal veterinary practice. And as I started off having almost failed the veterinary course because I had to spend more time campaigning for alternatives and studying. But over time, I ended up being very competent at what I did, because I think that anyone that is just really interested in good animal welfare and finding the best treatment protocols, etc., for animals will read all the articles in the veterinary magazines and just get better and better as time goes on. And I started off with the benefits of having 5 times the amount of surgical experience of my classmates, and then built on that by being interested in best practice and animal welfare, learning through reading articles and talking to other vets, and became very comfortable at what I was doing as a small animal vet. In fact, I was also asked to start doing various studies, publishing academic studies. I initially was publishing some about humane teaching methods, but I was also asked by animal advocacy organisations to start looking at aspects of animal experimentation. I ended up publishing so many studies that I discovered you could get a PhD doing this. And so I started to seek out quiet veterinary practices, the ones where you would have maybe 2 to 3 hours in the middle of the day. Our days are 10 hours long in the UK, but in the quiet practices, you might get that time in the middle, and I'd start to be actually researching and authoring and publishing a whole body of studies, which became a PhD and ultimately became my book here, which is called The Costs and Benefits of Animal Experiments. So quiet practices mean you can get a lot of other things done as well.
You've got so many letters after your name and everything. And now I'm like just entering the whole publishing, writing papers thing. So I want to figure out your strategy for how you publish so much and do it. Like, what's your process? What software do you use? Do you use Zotero? How do you go about writing a paper?
I'm embarrassed to confess that sadly I've never spent the time learning how to use Zotero or any of the referencing software. This book here has 500 scientific references, and I did them all by hand
Oh my gosh.
because I've just never had the time. And I know that in the long run, I'm losing more time, but in the short term, I've never had enough time to learn how to use referencing software. So that's disgraceful, and I don't advise anyone to do that. But it also proves that you don't need that, to be
Yeah.
honest. What you do need to do is really just research your topic. So you need access to the scientific literature databases, and that's usually through a university. So particularly, you can start with Google Scholar and PubMed. They're publicly accessible, but they're also not sufficiently complete. And when you put in your methodology, I use Google Scholar, reviewers will generally critique that and say that's not acceptable. You do need to have access to good libraries where you have access to the literature. You basically research your topic, find all the literature you need, and the next important, crucial learning point is you don't actually read it. What you do is you skim it, because you never have the time to actually read
Yeah.
that insane body of information. You would need to be stuck in the Australian desert for 50 years with a desk to have a chance to read the amount that are generally retrieved. What you do is you skim for the points that are relevant and necessary for your topic, and you then start to write. Don't just throw down a draft and then start to build on it. And you'll start to flesh it out, and it'll get more and more big and complex, and there'll be subsections, and it will just naturally grow. It's not that hard. If I
Yeah.
can, anyone can. I just published my 50th peer-reviewed academic study, and believe me, it's easier than you might think.
Amazing.
50th time, anything's easier than you might think.
I also have fabulous colleagues nowadays.
Yeah.
I publish nearly 10 pieces a year, but I also work with half a dozen really talented colleagues who do the bulk of the work, and I might guide them or set them topics and things like that, or even contract with them and assist as a final author, but not as the primary person.
So the bulk of the writing, though, you've got to use some software like Google Docs, or are you using Microsoft Word, or like what's?
I do not use just pen and paper.
Yeah.
I do use Microsoft Word. What's
Okay.
important, by the way, is a really big display, a monitor, because you're opening up PDFs, which are 2 pages at a time, and you've also got a Word doc open, or you're looking at multiple Word pages and an Excel spreadsheet. So you need a big screen, and that's one thing. I travel a lot now, so I've been deliberately getting laptops the biggest displays possible. Really just Microsoft Word. If you are doing collaborative projects with others, things like Google Documents can be really helpful. That's pretty much it. This is not rocket science. This is all you need. And just to be an organized person.
Yeah.
The crucial thing is actually not making the mistake of thinking you need to read everything. Nowadays, AI models are becoming increasingly important and really interesting for writing. We have recently done a survey of academic journals to look at policies on AI model use, and also a survey of the main AI models to see how accurate they are and how useful they are, and their prices and so on. We'll be publishing that shortly. But essentially, academic journals normally do allow the use of AI models, providing that you clearly state that in your methodology, you describe what it was used for, you include in the appendices or supplements the exact prompts that you used, and you acknowledge the use of it. AI models can't be authors, co-authors, because they can't take responsibility for the whole paper, and all co-authors need to do that. You also need to check what the outputs, because often they hallucinate, they produce things that are not true. So authors need to be responsible for the accuracy of every word in the manuscript. So you do need to check everything, and the writing needs to be your own as well. You can use the AI models to help you do research, still needing to check everything they find, but the writing does need to be your own. But they're very useful. They're speeding things up a lot.
Oh,
Sure,
yeah.
and you're digesting this huge amount of data. It's easier when a machine can help you pre-digest it almost, masticate it for you.
We ran into a lot of hostility from one reviewer regarding our paper, like, especially the use of language. Like, we wanted to use the word kill, and they didn't like that. And they wanted us to use euthanize, and we didn't want to refer to animals as it. Have you run into any of those issues?
Absolutely. So the first year I was doing this, I was constantly getting that kind of feedback, and I was discovering that every single word you put in there needs to be able to withstand critical scrutiny from people who are not sympathetic, who are not on board with your mission to advocate for animals. And I would get a lot of, it seemed very harsh at the time, feedback. And as a result, it turned me over a year doing this into a writer who could produce words that all of which were able to actually withstand critical scrutiny. So you get to the point where you either change the wording and send it back in a subsequent draft, or you respond that this is actually killing,
Yeah.
and you defend the words that you have provided. And you end up with a defensible set of words, and that is really important. So on the actually going through that for a year made me a much more critical thinker, and I think it did something to my head. I think it made me closer to being intelligent than I ever was before. It definitely increased my critical reasoning ability. It was quite an interesting effect of just constantly going through this for about a year. It makes you a much better writer. The second thing is that I noticed that some reviewers and journals go beyond reasonable critical scrutiny. And there's always the question of, are they biased? Are they representing, for example, agribusiness interests or invasive research interests? E.g., I sent a paper once to a journal called Laboratory Animals, and it was rejected within 5 minutes. So I know for sure they hadn't read the paper. That kind of thing is obvious bias. If you have reviewers saying, please don't use the word killing for something that is killing, then that's going beyond what is reasonable. If you've used the word, this is abuse of animals, they might well ask if basically they don't like anything that suggests tone, or that you have a prior agenda, any kind of conscious or unconscious bias in your language. It's reasonable for those things to come out, but it's not reasonable to have to change language which is correct in a strict sense. If you can say this is actually killing, or by any reasonable definition of the word abuse, this is abuse, then if they still won't accept that, then they are the ones with the bias, not you. And unfortunately, bias appears to be strongest in this way with veterinary journals, I've found, and laboratory animal science journals as well. There are other
The
very
ones
good
that hold the
journals.
power. The ones
There
that
are
hold
other
the
very
power use euphemism and have the
yeah,
pushback on these things.
you can, and it will be a lovely study to do to document the types of biases that occur across the different journals. And I'm sure you can do that. I've never had time to do that, and I'm sure I never will. But the topic is ripe for anyone that wants to research and publish on that.
The use of the word euthanize when they're referring to something that isn't just the ending of the life of somebody who is suffering, like when it's referring to depopulation, or when it's referring to the killing of an animal after an experiment when they could have gone on living or have been adopted out or something like that.
Euthanasia is one of the most commonly misused. It's used to whitewash or ethics wash practices that are clearly not ethical. And by definition, it's eu plus thanatos. And so it's good plus death. And it means not only humane technique, but also in the animal's best interests. And people often use euthanasia when they should be referring to humane killing. Hopefully it's humane, but it's certainly not in the best interest of the animal. So it's not true euthanasia. It's being misused to whitewash unethical practices. So that's something that, as a reviewer, and I do a lot of reviewing nowadays, I do insist that authors use correct terms when I see this word being misused.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
You could just take one journal, right, Crystal? One journal
Yeah,
could
yeah.
be that would be enough. You wouldn't have to go to
JAVMA, Journal of
right.
the AVMA would be a good one to
Yes.
scrutinize.
That really is like banging your head against a brick wall trying to publish in veterinary or laboratory animal science journals. You can succeed, but you have to jump over hoops that are much, much higher than they ought to be. If you want to simply publish in good journals without all this unreasonable extra opposition, then there are plenty of other journals, and they're the ones that I choose all the time. I never bother actually with veterinary or laboratory animal science journals because of this problem.
I guess I beat you then here, since we've got one in the Journal of the Veterinary Medical Education coming out. So, well, yeah.
Well done. That is fantastic. I did publish a non-controversial one in that on the distance learning master's course we established in animal welfare and teaching methods. But you're right. If you're publishing something controversial, which this is, in that journal, then you've done extremely well. And I shudder to think how long and how difficult that process must have been for you.
So, what journals do you like to publish in?
I produce a high volume of outputs, and I want my outputs quickly to be able to support animal advocacy campaigns. So I want journals that are very fast. They'll either publish quickly or they will reject quickly, meaning you can move on to the next option. I also want journals with a reasonable acceptance rate. So I choose, and also it must be open access or have an open access option. So it's freely available on the internet for all readers. The authors have to pay a significant fee, but at least it's available then much more widely. There's two groups of journals that I commonly use. One is the Frontiers journal, such as Frontiers in Veterinary Science, Frontiers in Sustainable Food Systems. The other is the publishing house MDPI. They have many journals. One of those is called Animals. That's probably the leading animal welfare journal, and it covers all sorts of animal issues, broadly speaking, not just animal welfare. Another thing I look for is journals that are indexed in major scientific literature databases. So after journals have been around for at least a couple of years, they build up a track record. They might be accepted to be included in Web of Science or Scopus. These are the two big life and health sciences databases that I routinely use. When there are papers published about which databases you should use to adhere to best practice if you're doing a literature search, and they describe the use of databases such as Web of Science and Scopus to be best practice. I won't publish in journals normally that are not indexed in these two databases and that are fast and that have a reasonable chance of success. And the journals I pick normally have about a 50% acceptance rate or a 40% acceptance rate and so on. We write our papers very carefully. I've got a lot of experience nowadays, so we normally do succeed. It is important to make sure that every statement that you put in there will stand up to critical scrutiny. And also the communication needs to be very good. It needs to be very well written, clear, well structured, and so on. If you do those things, you would normally succeed. And if you don't, because a reviewer is being very unreasonable, you can make that point to the editor. They might appoint an additional reviewer. If they get two that are happy with the paper and one that isn't, they have sufficient justification to publish it. If you are very unlucky and you just can't get anywhere, and I've had all sorts of weird things happen. I've had journals lose my paper. Journals say they can't find reviewers when I point out that there's a bunch that are available, and all sorts of other bad things go on. Ultimately, you can submit somewhere else. I also publish a lot in the PLOS One, which is one of the world's leading open access general scientific journals. They're fantastic. They've got a really big reach, but they're quite a bit longer than just the few weeks with Frontiers and MDPR. They're more like 6 months, 3 to 6 months.
And
So
Oh,
it
wow.
seems like you're
that is to be borne in mind.
so much time that you're having to dedicate towards the follow-up. How as every writer, everyone seems to have a routine, right? I wake up, I write every morning before I do anything, and but how are you? But then it's always, what do you do after that? Like there's all these famous writers that'll write for 4 hours and edit for 4 hours, but it seems like you're writing, editing, and then following up with this power structure, this hierarchy that you've got to navigate, this Kafka-esque bureau of just doors and hallways that you're navigating. How are you dividing up your time? Do you have a ritual where you're you just you're going to do this for 3 hours? You're going to navigate the bureaucracy? What are we talking about here?
You're right. It can seem Kafka-esque. And I don't have the luxury of having 4 hours here, 4 hours there. Instead, I operate in a semi-permanent state of crisis, unfortunately. And just before coming on this podcast, I was desperately editing some text, and I'll carry on afterwards as well for another forthcoming publication. Yeah, unfortunately, this is why I've never learned to use referencing software. I'm always just so busy dealing with whatever is the most important thing at the time. And nowadays I travel a lot as well. So I have a laptop with the biggest screen I can get. And anyway, how do you deal with it? One thing that has helped is just the experience. I'm in the beginning. It can take a lot of time dealing with the submission process, referencing articles, knowing how to do initial query letters, how to respond to reviewers and editors. That's critically important. Nowadays, thankfully, I've actually got a lot of experience, so that just really helps speed things up. E.g., the standard process with PLOS One will take you first time through a couple of hours to actually compile all the documents. You have to put it into journal format. It typically will generate for you a sort of double-spaced document, which is line numbered, and it's 200 pages long, the PDF. And this is what goes to the reviewers. It'll be your manuscript, all your tables and figures. There might be a lot of those. A reference list, all double-spaced. The initial query letter, other information. You have to fill out these incredibly bureaucratic forms, so provide statements concerning research ethics, funding sources, conflicts of interest, and author contributions in detail, and so on. So this is a bit of a learning curve. It's a bit of a nightmare the first time you go it, but after you do that, it gets easier and much, much quicker and smoother.
Put in the reps. That's what it is, right? We talk, this is like Malcolm Gladwell, right? You do something 10,000 hours and you just get better at it. Just keep going, keep banging your head against that wall.
I think the best thing to do of all is get someone else to do it if you can. I've now got wonderful, very bright junior people wanting to work with me who I'm now starting to allow them to develop this valuable experience themselves with some guidance. So yeah, that's maybe the best solution.
There are people who love the bureaucracy and love to fill out forms and stuff. And I'm thankful for one of my co-authors who loves doing that sort of stuff. I am good at finding sources and writing stuff. I cannot deal with bureaucracy and filling out forms. I'm dealing with +1 right now too at the moment for another paper that I'm working on. That's when I'm going to have to hand off to somebody else because I literally cannot deal with them. We spoke at VA Summit and you were against recommending the veterinary profession to people. I'm out here trying to get more people to go to vet school because I want more people who are aligned with us. And I've carved out a pretty fun career for myself that I really love spaying and neutering and doing what I'm doing. And I have this flexibility. So what is your advice to somebody who's young and who wants to go and help animals? What should they do as a career? Is there any circumstance in which you'd recommend veterinary medicine, or are you like, no, this is not the way?
Yeah. Look, we're all here on the planet for a certain period of time. We all have this same question of what do we do with our time and our lives? The best answer I've ever been able to find is try and be the best version of yourself that you can be. Try and do the most good, try and do the least harm. What does that mean? It means probably if you've got a range of issues you could work on, think about effective altruism principles, thinking about what's going to affect the biggest numbers of animals or people, what is most amenable to change, what is the most neglected so other people aren't working on it, and what's a good match to your personal skill set and opportunities. If you're trying to help animals, I would argue that's the most important thing. Many more people working for human rights, and I continue to support all that, but animals are much more neglected and there are many more of them that are suffering. If you want to help animals, you could become a veterinary advocate. In that case, it is possible to have a fabulous career. Nowadays, for the first time, I'm really loving my job. As a vet in small animal practice, I had the normal challenges of insane workloads, insufficient time to be able to spend with animals, insufficient budgets, drugs, equipment to do what is necessary for them, which is all very stressful. And when your sole mission is to want to help them as much as they need, actually. So those are the limitations that are very common in small animal practice in the United Kingdom. We have an interesting system whereby we select so-called very bright people, and maybe the brightest and the best. They all go into this system, and the results are so commonly stress, burnout, compassion fatigue, suicide rates 4 times the general public, and basically high rates of mental health problems. Is this because of the people? I don't think so. We are selecting some of the most capable people in society. This is because of the system. So there's something seriously wrong with normal veterinary practice. When I did it, it felt like modern slavery because I was working so hard, and the days were 12 hours long. I had to commute as a locum vet, a per diem vet, to practices, do a 10-hour shift there, maybe with a break in the middle, and then an hour back. So it's exhausting. And then I went into academia and I was teaching, and I found that was exhausting. That was modern slavery. There was a time in the past when it was good to be a university professor. Those days are long gone, sadly. You don't get to sit in the armchair reading interesting books and thinking anymore. You don't get to do any of that stuff. All of that's gone. So it's modern slavery nowadays. And the first time I've really started to enjoy what I'm doing has just been a couple of years ago when I managed to quit and set up my own nonprofit. And now I get to research and publish and speak and communicate full time. I do more communication work, lots of media interviews, lots of talks, than actually publishing nowadays, full time, trying to advocate for animals. And it's fabulous. I'm working with super interesting issues, having the biggest positive impact I can have, working with bright, interesting people, traveling and seeing lots of wonderful places. So if you want to help animals in the biggest way that you can, I'd say just try and have a career like mine, try and do what I've done. What you've done also sounds fantastic. You're doing similar things. You're also working part-time, spaying and neutering homeless dogs and cats to decrease pet overpopulation, which is one of the biggest animal welfare concerns. I was doing that when I was a vet. So that's fantastic. I'd say that for most veterinarians that don't do what we've both done, it's a lot grimmer. The only way I'd recommend this, the only one I would be enthusiastic about would be a career like yours or mine. But anyone considering a normal veterinary career, and mind you, we're the less than 1%, but this is now possible. It is now possible. It wasn't previously easy to do this, but it's become much more easy in recent years to do what I'm doing and probably what you're doing than it ever used to be. So this is starting to become a career pathway, and I definitely encourage people to follow that. People wanting to be normal vets, I'd say have your eyes wide open. Really go and find out about what the stresses are and the relatively low rates of pay. On the plus side, you do get to help thousands of individual animals, big picture changes like banning certain farming systems, which is what we get to work on. But at least you'll help thousands of individual animals and their people as well. And that's the only plus, to be honest. People need to have their eyes wide open about what they're contemplating getting into. And there are other options. If you want to advocate for animals, you could be a lawyer, you could be a dietitian, a human physician, do something else, do a support role, in graphic design, management. Yeah, all of those are probably, nearly all of those would be a lot less tough. And you could also have a big impact for animals.
And if you have an interest in business or running a business or something like that, I know us nonprofits, we need help with fundraising and we need help with just the administrative duties involved with running a nonprofit, which as veterinarians, it's not really my cup of tea. Before I went to veterinary school, I started my own business. So I was very business minded going in, but most veterinarians are not. We're more hands-on, tactile people than business people. So I definitely think, and in the animal field as well, any animal advocates, mostly we're not very business savvy, financial savvy people. We're just very caring people, but we need those people who can do the financial part of things and the administrative and the HR part of stuff for sure.
But one of the things you lend legitimacy because of a DVM next to your name, because of that piece of paper, because of that diploma, the degrees. I don't know how we overcome that challenge you intimated earlier about having wanted to advocate for animals, but every time someone asked you what do you do for a living, you said I'm a pro video gamer or whatever. You felt like you had an inferiority complex because of that. Is there a way to how much of that was in your mind, and is there a way that we could overcome that in other ways than dedicating all this time to getting fancy degrees, the horrors of small practice and all these other things?
The world has changed. There's a much bigger opportunity to use social media and to, as you said, become a champion video gamer, which I sadly wasn't. But young people seem to get more of their news nowadays online than from traditional sources such as newspapers. There's a huge role for educational short summary videos and other outputs via social media. For those communication channels, it's probably not necessary, although it's always preferable to have advanced degrees. If you're communicating to other audiences, such as governmental stakeholders, industry stakeholders, policy bodies such as veterinary associations, pet care associations, then you're not going to be taken seriously, unfortunately, if you don't have either advanced degrees, a veterinary degree, a PhD, or some kind of track record, e.g. publishing a series of well-regarded expert reports. And I think whether it's worth getting those advanced degrees depends on the role you want to take. If you want to be a front person actually doing the communication to these stakeholder groups, and you're at an early stage in your life where you'll have decades to benefit from all that time and work of putting in a few years investment in the beginning, then I'd say it's worth it. If you are not so fussed about doing that communication, if you're not so much of an outgoing person, if you, for example, are more of a bookworm, you like to do the research and the writing, but you're not so comfortable in communicating, then maybe that person doesn't need to be you. Maybe you could be a research assistant.
Yeah.
If you love organizing things, maybe you should be the manager. Not all these roles require those sorts of degrees. And if you're not at an early stage in your career, the benefit is going to be less of putting all the time and financial investment into getting those. But if you are a young person interested in doing that communication, supporting the campaigns with advanced qualifications, then there is a pathway to follow. You could get a veterinary degree, and then if you wanted additional postgrad qualifications, become an animal welfare specialist. You could seek university affiliations, such as I've done. You could also not pursue the veterinary pathway and simply pursue a PhD, either in a formal structured way or externally on your own with guidance, and you would need to enroll with the university at some point. The latter is the pathway that I've followed, and I've done 2 of these now, one on vegan pet food and one on animal experimentation and alternatives and educational animal use. I'm very happy to guide any others that are interested in getting those sorts of advanced qualifications. One of the talks I give is exactly on career pathways and how to do this sort of thing. So it depends really where you're at in your life and what kind of role you want to have.
Interesting.
Awesome. A lot of us get really burnt out thinking about and writing about the horrors of what we do to animals. And how do you stay mentally healthy in dealing with all this? Do you meditate, work out? What's your routine to
Yeah.
staying healthy and dealing with all of this?
You're right, it's a huge issue because the most compassionate people, students, veterinarians, are likely to be the ones that are drawn into trying to make a difference for animals in all these terrible circumstances that we work on as animal advocates, but also going to be most deeply affected by it. How do you deal with that? Are you going to be constantly upset and end up suffering from things called compassion fatigue or burnout, have mental health problems? The way to deal with this, really, a couple of things. One is there's a bit of clinical detachment that I seem to have accumulated. I am regularly sent horrifying videos, undercover videos of animals being abused in slaughterhouses, farms, laboratories by organisations, animal advocacy groups every few weeks, and asked to give statements on those. And I'll very clinically run through it quickly and document the animal welfare abuses. And I'm not very much affected by that. So just by sheer exposure over time, I've become somewhat clinically detached. And there's a right balance, I think, between not caring at all and perhaps losing your compassion and ethics, and caring too much and becoming ultimately unable to function because you're so affected by what you're seeing. In the middle is a sweet spot where you care enough to be motivated to do what you do, but not enough that it impedes your functioning. It's the same with vets or doctors in clinical practice dealing with emergencies and other situations. And the second thing is maintaining your own health and well-being. We all need to, I think, try and carve out a little time on virtually a daily basis to do a couple of things. One is get some exercise and look after your body. Otherwise, all these hours at the desk are going to turn you into a blob once you're past about the age of 30. And it'll make you feel better mentally too. Secondly, try and have some fun. Try and have a little bit of time every day, really, even if it's just read a book chapter, and hopefully more than that quite often, where you're doing something that's really enjoyable. So for me, it's salsa dancing. I've gotten up to level 5 now at salsa.
You're gonna see you on Dancing with the Stars here soon. That's gonna
I
be.
tell you what, when you're doing this, you cannot think about work or the details. You can't do anything other than focus on what's happening. Gives your mind a complete break. You do something that is fun, you enjoy it, and takes your mind off work. Gives your batteries a chance to recharge. So find something fun, do it often, and it'll help you not to burn out.
And exercise too, it gets you away from the desk so you don't get to that sedentary situation. I'm at a standing desk all day and I think I'm doing myself a little help, but I forget to go for walks. I forget to
I
leave the
thought you're
house.
in a battery chicken farm or something.
I am I am also in a I'm in a standing desk in a battery chicken farm. That's where I'm at, an egg producing factory. Yes.
I've got one as well, actually.
Nice. Last, we've got a couple minutes left. I just wanted to ask you, what gives you hope, and what keeps you going? What gives you hope?
I'm not an unrealistic person. I don't look at the future of the planet and say I have lots of hope. That's not me. I'm a complete hard-headed realist. I think the one good thing is the opportunity you have, no matter where you are in life and on the planet, really, is to maximize the opportunity you've been given, whatever that may be. We're all here alive. We've got time on Earth. We've got various opportunities. What are we going to do with the opportunity that we've been given? You can always choose worse or choose better. You can always actually become the best person that you can be. And I think that's something that we can all have the hope of achieving. And that's really the best thing I think any of us can do. And the rest isn't up to us. So you can let it go.
Yeah. And where can people find you if they want to keep following your work?
I'm all over the internet. I've got a YouTube channel. I've got a whole bunch of animal advocacy websites. I've got a personal website that has a lot of my academic publications, various books, such as, by the way, this one is an entire book that's now open access.
The Routledge Handbook of Animal Welfare. Is that what it's called? Yeah.
That's yeah. So that's designed for animal advocates and also for vets who want to become specialists in animal welfare. It covers all the animal welfare issues and animal law in major regions of the world. So yeah, I'm all over the internet. Just search for me, Andrew Knight, veterinarian. I'm incredibly easy to find.
All your vegan animal questions, go to Andrew Knight's website and bug him about it. He's the expert. So
we did have one question from the chat asking if both of you were vegan before becoming veterinarians. I know the answer, but you guys didn't.
I was
chat doesn't
not.
know the answer.
I was vegetarian in vet school just because I couldn't get my act together.
I was actually an animal rights advocate before entering veterinary school, which made it particularly difficult going through, but you can do this and it's getting easier nowadays.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for joining us. And yeah, we'll chat later.
Thank
you
so much, Andrew.
Yeah.
That was Andrew Knight. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Being with All Being Considered podcast with Dr. Crystal Heath and me, Skyjack Morgan. I hope that you'll like the video. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And I'll see you on the other side of the day. I got my morning show, which I'm doing early in the morning tomorrow on the Skyjack Morgan channel. And that'll be Thursday, the last morning stream of the week. And then we've got Ethical Underground on Sunday. And what else? What else have we got? Oh my gosh, I can't even. Oh, and FOIA Friday at 4 on Friday. We're supposed to be doing FOIA Friday as well, where we use the Freedom of Information Act to find out as much as we can about these evil corporations that are screwing us, wrecking the world, and torturing animals. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. Bye. Thanks, everybody.